This is Lanzarote, those are volcanoes, and that is the Audi Q8. And if you're wondering what they've all got in common, then please join me for a little history lesson. The year is 2017. And Audi is a luxury car manufacturer that exclusively deals in petrol and diesel engines. A concept version of the flagship Q8 SUV has just been unveiled, and while a plug-in hybrid variant is on the cards, it's clear that the pure internal combustion variants will do the heavy lifting once the car is launched the following year. Fast forward to the tail end of 2022, however, and things are looking a little bit different. This is an Audi Q8, but to give it its full name, it's the Audi Q8 e-tron. And in fact, it joins other members of the Audi model family, such as the A4 and the A6, in becoming full electric vehicles, with their previous petrol and diesel variants becoming the A5 and the A7, respectively. In very broad terms, the even-numbered Audi models will eventually only be available as EVs. So what we have here is an amalgamation of the Audi e-tron, Audi's first ever electric model, and Audi Q8 nameplates, with the actual car being a heavy facelift of the former. Confused? Yeah, me too. But let's not ignore the fact that in the space of around 6 years, Audi's model lineup has gone from entirely petrol and diesel to being heavily reliant on EVs. I mean, it's a total reworking of the automotive landscape. Speaking of reworked landscapes, Lanzarote didn't always look like the inside of a barbecue. See, at the start of the year 1730, the island was an established settlement with its own economy, but then following 6 years of continuous volcanic eruptions, some of the longest on record, most of the population left, and the existing topography was largely wiped out. For the island, it was a total reset that took place over a number of years, and one that's still clearly evident in the present day. Now, of course, it's change on an entirely different scale, but let's not lose sight of the fact that this Q8 e-tron represents just how quickly the EV has become a major player for one of the biggest car manufacturers on the planet. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that they were launching the cutting-edge original e-tron, and now they're updating it, and also the electric models, well, they're nicking the names of some of Audi's most established petrol and diesel versions. I've only just got used to the whole 40 TDI, 45 TFSI thing, and now this! That said, the general design of the car hasn't changed that much as a result of the renaming process, but there are a few subtle updates. For example, the front end has been tweaked, so you have a new bumper design and a new grille design as well. Also, new Audi badge, very snazzy. It used to be obviously a 3D chromed effect where chrome was all the rage. Now it's sort of like an off-white 2D design. At night you'll see that there's an LED light bar that goes above the badge and between the two headlights, and that makes the car look wider, more purposeful, and it also gives it a pretty unique LED light signature. For the first time on an Audi, there's also self-sealing grille technology, which works in tandem with the slats in the grille, which close when the car doesn't need as much cooling and it wants to be more aerodynamically efficient. And that just adds to it, basically. There's a few aerodynamic tweaks, actually. There's the air curtains that you can see here. There's a few fins around the wheel, which diverts the airflow. And all of that together actually makes a fairly big difference, because with the old Sportback, you were getting a drag coefficient of 0.26. Now, though, with the tweaks, it's 0.24, and that's not a bad improvement. Also worth highlighting is the optional digital matrix LED headlights. They've got up to 1.3 million pixels per headlight, and they can change the beam of light from the pixels 5,000 times a second.
So that means that they are super precise, and they can give you what Audi calls its orientation light, which goes out in front of the car and it shows you where you are in your lane on, like, for example, a dark country road. It's very, very clever, but don't ask me how much it costs to replace if a stone goes through one of them, because that would be very painful. Coming around the side, it's really all about the new alloy wheel designs that you can get with the Q8 e-tron, and some nice lettering on the B-pillar here. So you can see it says SQ8 Sportback, e-tron Quattro and Audi. Lovely. The virtual door mirrors, they are still available. They're still controversial, love them or hate them, and you can get them on the Vorsprung spec car.
As before, the Q8 e-tron is available in both traditional SUV and Sportback body styles in trim levels ranging from Sport, S-Line, Black Edition and Vorsprung, with the cheapest coming in at just under £70,000. There's 3 different powertrain options on offer too, including the SQ8 version that we have here.
Now onto the cabin, and if I'm being honest, there isn't that much in here that's particularly different from the pre-facelift version, but there are still a few interesting tidbits that I want to tell you about, and they revolve around recycling. And bear with me, because this is the first car to use mixed plastic waste and then turn it into safety critical components via a chemical recycling process. And what I mean by that is that via the dealer network, Audi gets hold of scrap plastic, and then they filter out the metal and the glass, aka the bits that they don't want, and then via pyrolysis, they turn it into oil. That oil is then turned into plastic granules, and the plastic granules are then turned into things like the plastic seatbelt buckle cover, which is obviously very important if you're in an accident. So it's a very environmentally friendly process. Audi's doing it with a company that specializes in this, and they made it themselves. So that's great. And it also feeds into a wider theme of sustainability in this cabin, which is obviously very important for EVs. So on the decorative inlay, or as I would call it, the trim, you can have a material that's made out of recycled plastic bottles, and also the seats, the sport seats, they're made up of artificial leather and a microfiber, which is up to 45% fabricated polyester.
Along with this, the rest of the cabin is peak Audi. So that means lovely quality, it's honestly not too far off a Bentley, and lots of tech. Available materials include walnut, grained ash and carbon, while the Audi Sport stitching package adds red stitching throughout. As before, Audi's MMI system uses an upper 10.1-inch display and lower 8.6-inch screen, with functions divided between each. It looks smart and works pretty well, even if some of the usability has been lost with the removal of a rotary dial controller. Meanwhile, the environmentally friendly sport seats are super comfortable and can be specced with heating and cooling functions, as well as a massage program that uses 10 pneumatic cushions to relax the occupants on long journeys. The latter comes as standard on Vorsprung spec models, along with other features such as a heated steering wheel, Audi Virtual Cockpit Plus, automatic closing doors, and the Technology Pack Pro. Also, rear seat passenger space and boot space in the Q8 e-tron is pretty good and beats the Jaguar I-Pace, but you will get greater practicality from the BMW iX thanks to its larger dimensions. Now though, let's talk about how it drives. So what are the biggest issues with electric cars? Well, for me, the one that stands out is range. You see, with a diesel Q8, you could easily do 500 miles on a single tank, but with the e-tron, you're looking at more like 200 miles, which is great when you're on an island that's the size of New York City, but if you're anywhere bigger, then you kind of want a bit more than that. Happily then, the Q8 e-tron comes with a much improved range. There's 2 battery sizes on offer. There's the 89 kilowatt in the 50 model, and then in the 55 and the SQ8 versions, you've got a 106 kilowatt battery. Alongside this, Audi has improved the battery management system, cell chemistry and packaging, meaning that in the 55 e-tron Sportback, total range is up to 343 miles, a boost of around 60 miles from the existing model. Meanwhile, maximum charging speeds depend on whether you go for the smaller or larger battery pack. With the former, it tops out at 150 kilowatts, and that increases to 170 kilowatts with the latter. Either way, you're getting a 10 to 80% charge in around 30 minutes.
As for performance, well, this is the SQ8 version, so there is plenty of that. You've got one motor on the front axle and you've got two motors on the rear axle, and together they create just under 500 brake horsepower and just over 700 pounds-foot of torque. So despite the fact that this weighs 2.6 tons, it goes from 0 to 62 miles an hour in 4.5 seconds. What's more, it's efficient speed, because by managing to get a stronger magnetic field from the electric motors, Audi says that now the Q8 e-tron can get the same torque by using less energy.
However, it's not all about straight line speed, especially in a world where all luxury EVs are very quick. How it drives is also very important, and with the Q8 e-tron, Audi's made a very conscious effort to move things forward from the e-tron.
I mean, that car didn't handle badly, it just wasn't particularly exciting. And yes, that's difficult in a big, heavy electric SUV, but other manufacturers such as BMW and Jaguar, well, they do it better. So in order to improve how the Q8 drives, Audi's made a few changes. They've quickened up the steering rack, they've stiffened up the front axle lateral control arm bush, they've loosened off the ESC and tweaked the suspension. And the result is, for me, a car that now handles, I'd say, as well as a BMW iX. So it's not exceptional in the corners, and it is still extremely heavy, and you can feel that, but the steering feels more direct, it feels more purposeful, and it's also very nicely planted regardless of how quickly you go into a corner. Just what you want from an Audi, which is supposed to provide the ultimate security. You can, if you want, turn the ESC into a sport mode or off entirely, but honestly, I wouldn't recommend it. It's pretty pointless. But then it's nice of Audi to think of you if that's the kind of thing that floats your boat.
If you just want to sit back and cruise though, the Q8 e-tron is exceptional. Despite humongous 22-inch wheels on the SQ8 version, the ride on standard fit air suspension is seriously smooth. Although, if you do want the last word in comfort, the smaller wheels and more relaxed gait of the regular 50 and 55 models is where it's at.
What really stands out about the comfort in this car is just how refined it is, because obviously you don't have the noise from a petrol or a diesel engine, but with electric cars you often find that you get noises from other areas which you wouldn't usually notice because the engine drowns it out. But in this, I mean, it's so serene, you can barely hear a thing. It's properly good refinement in here. I tell you what though, I'm still not a fan of the virtual mirrors. You don't have to have it with the Q8 e-tron, but they are standard on the Vorsprung spec. And for me, they feel like the answer to a problem that nobody, well, ever said was actually a problem. No one really complained about door mirrors as far as I know, and I can see why they've done it for the extra aerodynamics, and it is a talking point, but in reality, they just don't work as well as good old-fashioned glass. They're not as easy to use, you kind of lose a little sense of perspective, and it's also harder to adjust them quickly. So it'd be better if we just had normal door mirrors.
Those virtual mirrors are a pain, and I honestly think that some people will be put off buying the car altogether because they simply don't work anywhere near as well as actual mirrors. And that really would be a shame, as the rest of the car is a great showcase for what Audi does very well.
When Audi launched the e-tron as its first ever all-electric car, it was a massive statement, and we liked it a lot. But in the last few years, rivals have caught up very quickly and they've launched some very capable alternatives. And that's meant that the e-tron is no longer the de facto choice. But with this update and this name change, I reckon that it's back to the top of, or near the top of the pile. The handling changes and improvements are welcome, but I reckon it's that extra range and charging ability that really brings it back to where it needs to be. The e-tron, the Q8, the Q8 e-tron, whatever you want to call it, Audi's big luxury flagship SUV, it's got its mojo back.